My guest today is a singer, songwriter, musician. He is well known for his contributions to bands like the Punters and the 8-Track Favorites. He's a prolific recording artist. You may know him from his television show, This Old Guitar, which is seen here on Rogers TV and also on Eastlink Television. Some of you may even remember him from his years hosting the Potluck Show on Kix FM. His name is Larry Foley, and I'm delighted to have you on the show, Larry.
I'm delighted to be here, Carl. I almost want you to do like some weather for me, just because it's such a kick to be here with you. It's awesome.
Yeah, well,
I grew up watching you do the weather, so but hang on, you're doing the interview,
you invited me on your show. That's what I'd have to do.
We're going to talk about that.
I can't play a guitar. So.
Yet.
Anyway, let's go back to the beginning. You were born in Placentia. Great place to grow up, I imagine. What was it like?
It was. Placentia is an interesting little town because it's not an outport as such, although fishing went on there. And everybody's parents seemed to be from somewhere else. I always found that of interest. I guess, me and my friends were born and raised there, but none of our parents seemed to come from there. And I guess that was a byproduct of resettlement in the 60s. And my mother's family from the western side of Placentia Bay, a place called Petty Fort. Even though the community didn't resettle, they had moved in during that era. And my dad's from Fogo Island. He came to work there, and my parents met in Placentia, and here I am. But it was an interesting town. We had a movie theater, and it wasn't quite rural, but it wasn't quite urban either. We were somewhere stuck in between, right. Which made it interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. It's been my impression that a lot of folks from Placentia have Irish roots. Is that the case?
It is, very much so. I suppose, historically, if we want to go back to Patrick Morris, who was one of our earlier premiers when we were at Dominion, I think, something like that. He helped establish a passenger trade there probably in the early 1800s, pre-famine. So that's supposedly where... My mother tells a great story. I don't know where she read it somewhere. When the ships would come over from Ireland, they would bring soil with them for ballast. Oh. And they would dump it off in Placentia. It's right around where we grew up, so I was raised literally on Irish soil.
That's a great story.
It is. I need to know more.
I hope it's true.
Yeah, well, I'm going with it.
Yeah. So, did you come from a musical family?
Yes, in some ways, and not in the way you'd think, everybody sat around and played. My father's father was a great singer. You can find him in some collections. If you go through the archives, Figgy Duff and Pamela Morgan collected some songs from him and my great-uncle Philip. So there was a great song tradition on my father's side. My mother's family, just great lovers of music. They're the people with the radio up really loud all the time. Yeah, or if my mom likes a song, she plays it all day. Yeah. Like that kind of thing. So I was, although I was late to playing music, I never started till I was a teenager, sort of vicariously picked it up through my friends, because everybody seemed to play something. So I didn't have early training or any of that. I think I just wanted to play so bad eventually that I just made myself do it.
Why I find that so interesting in your case is because I know you were taught by nuns and Christian brothers, and the Catholic school system was famous for its music programs.
Yes, for singing and stuff. I don't know. I didn't take piano, which a lot of kids did for some reason.
But in some Catholic schools, they actually had bands that taught.
Sure, that seemed to have petered out by the time I came along.
Okay.
I started high school in '86, and they didn't have any bands on the go at that point. But drama was certainly a thing, and I probably was more sort of, had more background in that than anything else. But, a little theatrics never goes astray no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. I say that because I interviewed Mark Critch last year, I think it was. Yeah. And he went to St. Teresa's, and they had a band there, and they tried to teach him how to play the cello. Didn't work out too well.
He's doing okay.
He did okay. Yeah. So what was the first instrument you found yourself wanting to play? And did you teach yourself how to play?
I did pretty much. I think I wanted to be a drummer.
Ah, yeah.
I think I wanted to be a drummer. I know I did, in fact, but that just didn't seem to be in the cards for a whole bunch of reasons. It's hard to believe now when you see kids growing up today in my own kids, there's such access to instruments and lessons and all that. It seems like I grew up in the dark ages. Like there was if someone had a set of drums, you went over, looked in through the window to see them. Like it sounds like I grew up in the 30s the way I talk about it. You know.
Well, in a way, anybody who's like over 40 today, kind of did grow up in the dark ages.
The place has changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, guitar seemed to be more favored, and my mother was if you wanted to learn to play guitar, then okay, we'll get you a guitar kind of thing. And I think Brother Costello taught me my first 3 chords. I was probably in grade 9 then, which is still pretty late, you know. And I only messed around with it really. I didn't really get serious about it until I went to university, ironically enough, in Nova Scotia. But I think that's sort of right around the same time too. I guess sort of the moratorium happened. I felt we had a real cultural awakening here in the early 90s with groups like the Irish Descendants and stuff came along, and all of a sudden, you know, Newfoundlandia wasn't as cheesy as it had been. You know, the drum machine and the accordion didn't really appeal to me when I was younger, but somehow the acoustic guitar and
kind of boom chicka boom.
Yeah, and which I love now, you know, for pure nostalgia reasons, I suppose. Yeah. But you know, it just wasn't that cool to someone in their teens going into their early 20s. But somehow when I heard the Irish Descendants, the fiddles and the arrangements were so clever and the harmonies were so great. I was like, okay, I can. And then I sort of went back through the Ryan's Fancy catalog and I revisited that because I remembered the show from growing up, and then that all sort of culminated into I don't know. Maybe, you know, you're that age, you're up to 20, finding your own identity. And it's funny you mentioned the Irishness off the top, because somehow or other that it helped me establish who I was, you know, because, you know, some people, I want to be Irish, but it was like I went through my roots, and especially on the Fogo Island side and Tilting, where my dad is from. Yeah. There's Irish immigration, dates back to the 1790s there. I went in the graveyard and had a look around. So, you know.
That's one way of finding out.
Yeah, so the music sort of went hand in hand with probably some kind of, you know, identity kind of thing as a younger man.
So you chose to go to St. FX and studied political science. Why political science? Did you want to be a journalist, a politician, a lawyer? What?
I probably heard someone say if you wanted to be a lawyer, then political science is a good way to go. So I said, I'll do that. Because I had done, you know, I wasn't really math science minded at all.
Me neither.
I'd get through it. I could get it done. I'd memorize it and pull it off, you know. But I seemed like in high school we had what was called democracy, right? Law and democracy. There were the 2 sort of social studies things, and I did well at those. And I thought, okay, well, I have an aptitude for that. So I thought, well, you know, hedge my bets on. Man, no one told me about how many papers I was going to have to write. A lot of papers. A lot of papers. Yeah. But yeah, when I finished at St. FX, I thought I might go to law school, but I thought I wasn't ready. I'm born late in the year, so I was quite young starting university. I was only 17 when I went there. Yeah. So, but by the time I graduated, I was still, you know, pretty young, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I had a professor from Ireland at St. FX, and he said, well, why don't you look at some master's programs? I was like, well, this sounds like a great way to go spend a year, you know. And man, I got a scholarship to go to Cork City for an MA program in
University College.
Yes, UCC, yeah. Where Finbar taught, let Munster learn. That's their logo. So off I went, and that's where my life began, I think, really, you know. It was, you know, I went through, you know, from high school and off to university, and St. FX is a complete college town, and it sort of puts its arms around you, really. It was a really prescribed degree, you know, but then I woke up one day and I was in Ireland. I didn't know one Christian in the country. I was like, wow, okay, this is a test, you know. So I was like, okay, am I going to sit down here and have a big old ball for myself, or I'm going to walk out in the world and see what happens? So I walked down what they called the centre of the city in Cork, and walk along, see a pub with a fiddle and a banjo over the door. I was like, oh, this looks promising. So I just walked in there, just completely, like out of the blue, I look in, and here's Seamus Cray sitting down playing fiddle, whom I had not met, but I knew he played with Tickle Harbour, and I was like, I recognize this guy. And then I struck up a conversation. He's like, oh my God, could we come back to the house for a cup of tea or whatever? And they sort of adopted me for the year or so I was there. I got to meet some great musicians, you know, in the real purest traditional vein of you know, instrumental music. And God, went on
So
from
you really
there.
soaked up the Irish culture for,
Yeah,
for a whole year, I
really,
guess.
And you know, the MA was the excuse, I suppose, really. But I mean, I wasn't over there like, oh, looking for our land, or you know, I just wanted to go experience it. But what I found most interesting is every corner you see someone you recognize.
Yeah, but the fact that, you know, even though you probably didn't know much about your family tree, the fact that
No,
you
not
knew
a whole
you had
lot.
Irish roots made a difference, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being in the motherland, so
Yeah,
to speak.
yeah, for sure. I think it's something everyone who has Irish roots should do. You know, and it's easy to get wrapped up in that whole shillelagh green shamrock business. But, you know, just the sense of humor is really what I most attach myself to. It's like, if you're going to open your mouth over there, you better have thought 20 times what you're going to say, because someone's going to shoot you right in the foot in a very humorous manner.
The thing that struck me when I was in Ireland, and I went all through Ireland last year, is how much they look like us.
That's what I mean. You recognize someone on every corner.
It's like...
Yeah, you can equate, oh, look, that fellow looks just like this guy.
You can take these people and put them in St. John's, and they blend right in.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, you know, the sense of humor was, you know, I was on a train going from Dublin to Cork, and there was a young, you know, a steward, I guess, you know, and he had the sandwich cart, the one that goes between the seats, and the poor guy, he smacked every seat up through the train, right? And one guy leans over and goes, would you ever put an L card on that one? Which is the learner for if you're getting your license, right? I was like, I just love that kind of dry wit. My father's family especially, the dry wit is like is a perpetual contest, you know.
So you did community development at UCC. Why community development?
I guess in my youthful exuberance, I thought I would try to learn something that I could bring back here to be of value to someone. I mean, you got to put it in the context of the moratorium and all that, and that's what the program was sort of about. And I thought, well, this could be something that I could parlay back once I came home, you know. And I started work right away when I got back.
And this was with Extension Community Development.
Yes, which was, you know, formerly Mun Extension.
Right.
So I got a gig as sort of their field worker for a year, right? Now, there's a little backstory there. While I was in Ireland, I met Jason Whalen from St. John's, musician. He was over there studying recording arts in Dublin, and I was in Cork. So he and I used to meet up scattered weekend, you know, he'd come down to Cork or whatever, and we'd go around and see some gigs and stuff like that. We often talked, maybe when I come home, maybe we'd see if we could get something on the go musically, you know, try to get a band together or something. So that was the nucleus of what happened the rest of my career, or dare I say, after that. That was a great gig too. I went all over the island with this, it was called the National Roundtable on the Sustainability of Cold Ocean Ecosystems.
There's a title.
Yeah, and I met, all kinds of interesting folks from all over the country, and we were going all over the little communities, talking to stakeholders in the communities, and, you know, talking about the future. You know, you had the tags and NCARP and all that stuff was after happening, you know. And oddly enough, through all of that, when I get back to the office, and, you know, I'd write up a report or something, and I looked around the office one day and I was like, I feel like I'd probably do more to develop something if I just followed what my real passion is, as opposed to sitting down writing proposals for other people who have ideas who want to develop them. And it's, you know, it sounds a little retrospective analysis, but I think that's what I thought. And anyway, the beauty of it was I got laid off. And
that'll focus the mind.
Yeah, I got laid off like coming into the spring, and so I guess short version, Jason and I and his friend from high school, Patrick Moran, we said we'll get a little band together for the summer, see what happens. And you know, that was 26 years ago.
1994.
Yeah. So, and it's been an interesting ride. I still think of it as an education every day, you know.
So, Larry, was there an event or a gig where you guys were on stage performing and it struck you, we can make a living doing this?
I think so. I think once it started, now, the other thing too, we paired up with Brian Kenny and George Morgan, two very seasoned guys, and also too, it's worth mentioning that all of them at some point or other, Jason anyway, and Brian and George had been in the Plankerdown band, which was right before. So I mean, you know, Punters wasn't reinventing the wheel or anything, but we were just putting, you know, sort of bringing a more of a song vibe to that tunes tradition or whatever. And as soon as I would nearly say the first time I rehearsed with those guys, I was like, because I had played, you know, with another guitar player and a bass player or something, but you know, this was something else. Like it's just there was a magic there that clicked, right? And that original band for the first 2 or 3 years, however long that original lineup lasted, was incredible, you know. And I recently was rooting through looking for something, and I found the first CD, and I just put it on. I was like, because you know, you hate your own stuff for the longest time, or because it didn't do so well commercially, you think it was a failure, or you know. But that album put us on the map.
And you listen and you say, God, I was pretty good.
Man, I was surprised. I was like, how did I come up with that then? Or you know, it's funny. It's like looking at your old school pictures, you know. But it's funny all these years later.
Just talk about that ride, because it was a bit of a ride for several years with the original band, because you know you were doing gigs and traveling.
Well, it just sort of took off. Yeah, you know, in relative terms. Now, I mean, you know, we weren't top of the pops or anything, but you know, we started getting shows, and we started. You know, the ECMAs was sort of new then, and it was something to be excited about.
And it was a big deal back then too.
And the first year we went. John Allen Cameron's manager saw us and thought, that's interesting. Yeah. And they were putting together the show in New York. It was an international music festival, basically, at Lincoln Center.
Wow.
And next thing you know, we're on a plane. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And,
that's fabulous. Yeah.
You know, for a young guy, it was pretty mind-blowing, really. And then, you know, then you had the honeymoon phase of any band, right? And then, you know, they didn't want you to do. The next thing you know, you come home with, you know, unrealistic expectations of this thing. You know, this is just giving me enough of a taste to want to really, really go at it, right? And then there was a lineup change, and there was a second album. Then we got a record deal, the second album, and then we got the glorious task of traveling the country. Yeah. The old-fashioned way, you know, from here to Vancouver and back. We did that for like 5 years, pretty much.
Any interesting stories come out of those trips?
I don't remember any. I do remember one time just coming home, and I ran into Dermot O'Reilly, and I was, you know, he was always very interested in what we were doing. You know, he was such a sweet man, and he would say, you know, I was telling him the route we went through, you know, and I was saying, you know, touring can be a bit laborious, as you know. He said, well, you can only cross your legs so many ways. And it was kind of like that, too. But, you know, for a young guy, what a way to see the country. We went everywhere. Yeah. You know, and like I said, we weren't exactly, you know, doing sold-out halls everywhere. We were playing clubs, playing festivals, you're playing, you know. You'd have, what I always found, you'd have on a tour of, say, 4 or 5 weeks, you'd have like a handful of really good gigs, and then the rest of them you're just working to pay for the band being on the road. Lots of nights you're doing like, you know, pretty subpar gigs just for the rooms and the meal, right? Like that's the part no one really talks about. But again, you know, it's an education. I guarantee you that.
I think the first time I interviewed you, you guys were performing with the Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra.
I remember that.
That must have been a pretty good experience.
Again, like stuff like this started to happen. You know,
like having a symphony orchestra back you up. Right?
Yeah, and then being interviewed by Karl Wells on CBC, and like, and the other thing too was, you know, I sort of felt in a way, and you know, for my parents' sake, that I was like throwing away my education and all this stuff I'd worked at to go run away and join the circus effectively. But you know, I found we did enough legit stuff that I was actually, you know, justifying, like, oh, hey, Mom, Dad, you know, this is working. You know, this is a good thing, right?
Larry, one thing I loved that you did a few years back was you brought back the name of Omar Blondel and reminded people of how important Omar was to the music culture of Newfoundland and Labrador. Just because I'm sure there's people watching now who don't know who I'm talking about. But just talk about him for a second.
It was really funny. My brother phoned me up one day and said, there's a Martin in the buy cell, Martin guitar. Because I'm a bit of a guitar hound, as people know. So I thought I said, go check it out. I think I rang up Sandy. And again, this was before the internet too, right? I mean, so if there was a Martin around, you'd sniff it out, right? And I called Sandy Morris about it, and he said, I think I saw it in another publication or something. So I went and checked it out, and the guy's name was Clusen, the guy that was selling it. I forget his first name, not Mr. Clusen. And So this was Omar Blondel's guitar. When I was at St. Avex, I was a music librarian. So I was in there no matter what, Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, I was in the music library.
Yeah.
And it was just walls of records. But they had a folk music section, and it was like Sing Along Jubilee and Don Messer, and Jim Payne and Ferguson, or Jim Payne and Kelly Russell's album was there, and there was a couple of Omar Blondel records. So I had already been educated in the world of Omar at this point, right? I'd heard of him growing up, but and here was the guitar I remembered from the album cover. So that was how all that started. Once I got I bought the guitar off the guy, and whose father had been a friend of. His father was Goose Cluson, who's mentioned in the song Charlie Horse. Here's to Charlie Horse, here's to Shave the Master. Anyway, Goose Cluson is mentioned in the song, and that's who had the guitar. Omar sold it to him when he was leaving Newfoundland. But interesting guy, he was Scandinavian descent from Western Canada, came in here on a boat.
He was the first guy to really record Newfoundland music.
I talked to, some notable Neil Rosenberg, for example, characters about him, and he did, and his playing was quite virtuous. He wasn't just a guy banging on the guitar. His chord arrangements were really accurate and nicely done, and he was a real character by all accounts. But he came in here, I think, on his way to Europe, and he just needed a gig, and he went up to CJON, I think, at the time, and said, he had some experience as an announcer, I guess, or song and dance man. I don't know. He seemed to be a guy for all seasons, but I was happy to be the catalyst to put his name back out there for a while.
I thought it was great because I kind of grew up knowing him as well.
Right.
And hearing his music on the radio, for example. I mean, it was great that you reminded people about him.
Well, see, that's me all over, right? I love stuff like that. Antiquities, stories about something interesting from Newfoundland. Professional Newfoundlander, I guess.
So, Omar Blondel has made me think, who are your musical heroes? Like, are there icons in the business that you look up to? Sure.
Oh my goodness, yes. And that's one of the beauties of growing up here. We had our own heroes. I guess early on, I grew up with radio on in the house constantly. It was either VO or the Marystown affiliate, CHCM. That was on our house 24/7. They had a program in the afternoons called the Showboat Show, which was pretty well all Newfoundlandia, right? It wasn't called that at the time, but you had Carl Show Band, Ryan's Fancy, the Dick Nolans, the Harry Hibbs, all that kind of stuff. And then you had later on the sort of the Newfoundland country set. You had A. Frank Willis in there and Peter Francis Quinlan and all of that stuff. So I was aware that music on the radio could be from here. It wasn't all in LA or something, But I think between the Ryan's Fancy and the Wonderful Grand Band, it was probably like, which everybody my age was glued to, I think that sort of planted a seed too. It was like, okay, this is pretty fun. I tell Sandy all the time, it's too bad he spent all the money.
You have a recording studio in your house. Now, do you just record yourself, or do you record other people as well?
No, I've done lots of stuff. It's actually graduated to a hay barn in my backyard.
Oh.
Yeah. So I recorded a lot of material for the Avondale Music label and the Our Songs series. There's like a bunch of those. So I produced a lot of that stuff, which I really enjoyed because, Lyle Drake, who's president of the company, he'd send me a list of songs. He'd say, here, let's get some singers.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a Sam Phillips type of deal, right? Yes. So I would, I'd call around, I'd say, who would suit this voice? And so I would lay down the basic tracks and get them to come in and, add their input to it. That was a great bit of fun. I enjoyed that period a lot. But right now, back to your original question, we just recorded the latest Punters album in there. And a young guy named Dave Whitty did one of his albums in there in the last year or so. So I kind of, it's not really a going concern as such. It's a place for me to keep my gear and, hang out, and when it strikes me to record something or someone wants to come in and use it.
It sounds great. Yeah. Now, you and your wife, Virginia, have 4 kids?
Yes, we do.
So some of them must be musical.
Yeah, the oldest guy now is actually in musicals. pre-COVID, he hooked a fairly one of the lead roles in a musical that was supposed to stage last summer with the Best Kind Productions, and summer before that he did Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat with the same outfit. So he's got the bug. He plays guitar a little bit. He goes to piano lessons, but I was going through the house the other day and I heard the Black Velvet Band. Like,
right.
And I'm like, what? Where did he hear?
That's going back.
Where did he hear it? Who? And I go down here. He's in the basement, and he's it's odd. He's ambidextrous, so he plays top and bottom melody with two hands.
Yeah.
I would pick it out with one hand, but anyway. And I was like, why are you playing the Black Velvet Band? Yeah, Daddy, I heard this. He said, I like this one. And I was like, oh, here we go. But I certainly hope we don't turn into a family band with a bus. I just hope that doesn't happen.
I've interviewed actors, and I've asked them, what would you say if one of your kids said, I'd like to be an actor, or I'm going to be an actor? What would your reaction be? And I have to ask you, what if your son says, I want to be a professional musician?
Well, not much you can say to him, is it, if he wants to do it? Yeah, there's worse things you could do. There's worse things you could be. It has a lot of pitfalls. It's hard on the head a lot, I mean, it's hard to keep yourself motivated sometimes because it's there's a lot of kicks in this game, right? That no one talks about when they're in interviews. And I find the longer I'm at it, the harder it is in some ways. Like I said, you can have those honeymoon periods of bands, and I've had that a bunch of times. Like the Punters had a couple of really good peaks along the way, and then the 8-track favorites came along. And that was another thing that took us for another ride we didn't expect, and it was almost 10 years. Turning around the aisle and doing that.
A whole different kind of music, too, because
completely. Well, that was sort of my parents' music,
Yeah.
And that was a real sort of nostalgia kick as well. And we just did that for fun. I never thought anyone would want to come see us do it.
I often wonder, if country music isn't as much a part of the Newfoundland culture as our traditional and European roots music.
Absolutely. Of course it is. Well, we had the basses here, too. I suppose the American basses in World War II had some impact on that. And not just World War II, after. Because I grew up next to it. The bass was still in full swing when I was growing up,
I wish we had more time, but that's it.
Carl, it's been great to be here with you. I love it.
Thank you. That's it, folks, for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. Please join me again next time.